Welcome to the Starts with Home Mayoral Housing Debate. I'm Natalie Duchesne, and I am honored to be your moderator today. Ottawa is located on the unceded Algonquin-Anishinaabe territory. Simply put, this land was stolen from the traditional keepers for the benefit of settlers. Dispossession of land is just one form of ongoing colonization that has led to a context where First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people disproportionately experience homelessness. Embracing Indigenous leadership and collaboration is the only way forward so that we can prevent, reduce, and eventually end homelessness. The land acknowledgement is a reminder of our commitment to reconciliation. But let's not let this just be a box that we check at the start of an event. Let's have this really be central to the conversation that we're having today, and I'm going to encourage our candidates to consider it in their answers. In January 2020, Ottawa City Council declared a housing and homelessness emergency. But this crisis did not happen overnight. It was decades into the making, as wages and social assistance rates stagnated, housing costs increased, and rental supply decreased. More and more of our city's residents find themselves paying unaffordable rents or facing homelessness. Certain groups are disproportionately impacted, including Indigenous, visible minorities, women, family, youth, and seniors. We need to move from managing the crisis to implementing real solutions. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Starts with Home is a coalition of people, organizations, businesses, and community groups that have joined together to build public and political support to end the homeless and housing crisis. Our solutions-focused platform has been developed by over 40 housing experts and community groups, and is supported by the Alliance to End Homelessness, Ottawa. We invited the 4 mayoral candidates who are leading in voter intention polls to come share their ideas and plans. Unfortunately, Bob Shirelli had to withdraw due to a family emergency. All 14 mayoral candidates have been sent a survey about Starts with Home, and their responses are available at startswithhome.ca. I'll explain the format for today and then introduce our candidates. We have 6 questions drawn from the Starts with Home platform and delivered by video by members of the community. The candidate speaking order was chosen at random just before today's event. I will throw the question to a particular candidate, and they will have 90 seconds to address the question. Each of the other 2 candidates will then have 90 seconds to respond and debate the issue. Time permitted, we'll also ask a couple follow-up questions, really just to dig deep into the question at hand. Now I'll introduce our candidates. First, we have Catherine McKenney. Next, Mark Sutcliffe. And then Noor Kadri. Welcome to you all.
Thank you, Natalie.
All right, let's dig in. Here's our first question on strengthening tenant protections.
Hello, my name is Lionel Duchesne, and I'm a member of Ottawa ACON. ACON and the Starts with Home platform are calling on the city to create municipal policies strengthening tenants' protections against renovictions and demovictions. I can tell you firsthand what it's been like to live through a demoviction. I currently live here at 142 Street, Nepean Street, which the city just approved to demolish for a parking lot. Barely 1 year after moving in, we heard about the demoviction project. After many months of actions, media, phone calls, and petitions organized by myself and fellow ACON members, the developer offered to match our rent in a different building close to ours for 5 years. But what is going to happen with us after that? In a few years, we could be forced to leave Center Town, but I don't know where we will be going. Perhaps my family of 3 will be forced into a 1-bedroom apartment, or we will have to make sacrifices on food, saving for our daughter's education, or are one-day retirement. This is why ACON and the Starts with Home platform calls on the city to create renovation bylaw and anti-displacement policy. We must protect the affordable housing that currently exists and stop mass displacement of families like mine. Would you, as mayor, support these measures rather than leave for-profit developers to set the standards of what is needed for the health of our city's housing market?
So how would you, as mayor, create measures to strengthen tenant protections against renovictions and demovictions and ensure long-term affordability of replacement units? Catherine, you'll be going first, and you've got 90 seconds.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, Lionel, for sharing your experience with us. I know Lionel. I actually worked very closely to stop the demolition of 142 Nepean Street, which is being turned into a parking lot to allow for another development a block away. There was absolutely no reason for this 6-unit apartment building to be allowed to be demolished. And when we allow for that type of demoviction in this city, we are almost certainly sentencing people to, very precarious housing. Even 5 years means that the clock is ticking the minute you move in. People do not do well when their housing is transitional. And for many, it is a sentence into homelessness. We've seen it happen over and over again. For every 1 unit of affordable housing that we build in this city, we know that we are losing 7. Such as 142 Nepean. So we need a strong anti-displacement policy. We have to, as a city, ensure that we are doing what we can to protect tenants, to ensure that we have the policies in place so that when developers come to us and ask for these applications, we can hold them to account. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Next, we have Mark. You have 90 seconds.
Natalie, thank you for hosting this debate, and thank you to Catherine and Noor for participating. I just want to take a minute to start out by saying how important this issue is to me, and I know to so many people in the community. I've heard, as I've knocked on doors over the last 3 or 4 months, about the issue of homelessness, and it's an important issue for everyone in our city. And I really like, Natalie, the way you framed the issue about how it disproportionately affects certain people in our community. And I did a TEDx talk about 4 years ago where I talked about how life, unfortunately, works like that, even in a place like Ottawa, how some people are left behind, how not everybody gets the same start in life or has the same opportunities in life, and that luck is distributed disproportionately. So this issue has been very important to me for a long time. It's actually one of the reasons why I started volunteering many years ago. I just couldn't believe that in a city like Ottawa that we could have, with the resources that we have, that there were people who were not able to have a safe, permanent place to sleep at night. So I started volunteering with United Way Ottawa, with the Ottawa Food Bank, with Ottawa Community Housing
Mark,
on
I
issues
want to make
like
sure
this.
you have time to address the question, tenant protections.
Yeah, so I do support protecting tenants, and I think we need to look at a municipal bylaw that will allow for a balanced approach to this issue that respects everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Noor, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Natalie, and Starts with Home for organizing this timely debate. And I want to thank my colleagues for bringing their ideas, Mark and Catherine, also into that debate. Homelessness is a plight, and home affordability is a right for everyone. And what we are seeing in Ottawa is something that is at a grander scale, especially in Ontario and all over Canada. And what we need to do is to deal with the root causes of the problem. A city bylaw would be a first step in the right direction. I have been working on these issues for a long period of my time. When I was president of the Canadian Area Federation, I participated with a group in Ontario that is called the Colours of Poverty. And it was with organizations like the Assembly of First Nations, the Chinese Canadian Clinic, the African Canadian Clinic, the National Council of Canadian Muslims. And these are groups that are all marginalized. And we have seen that the issue time and again keeps coming up. So renovictions and demovictions are aspects of the economy that a lot of builders, they would want to build non-affordable housing or market housing with those. While they're making a lot of cash and a lot of money out of this, they leave those disenfranchised organizations or these people outside the market. We need to end that.
Thank you, Noor. Mark, you talked about balance, and I'd be really curious from each of your perspectives what that means for you, specifically when it comes to tenant protections for renovictions and demevictions. We'll go in the same order as you address the question, and I'll ask you just to be brief so everyone has a chance. Catherine, you can start.
So when you're talking about people who are losing their housing, when we're not retaining our existing affordable market housing, there is no way that we can build our way out of that. We've got to build more affordable housing. We have to stop people from falling into homelessness. It is the only way we're going to get on top of this emergency. And as a city, we've not, we've declared the emergency, but we've not called 911 yet. We continue to allow for evictions to happen, and while we don't have the full authority from through the Planning Act to stop that, what we can do is almost any time that we have an application in front of us following a demeviction or in place of a demeviction, we can then put that pressure onto the developer to ensure that we are getting that replacement, that we are getting something, a community benefit. When we say yes to development, we need that community development.
Thank you, Mark.
So I think this is, obviously, this is a very complex issue, as you pointed out, Natalie, and I think it's driven by, and Catherine, you're right, that we can't let people fall into homelessness to begin with, and it's driven by our economy. We need a strong economy with more jobs and with higher wages for people going forward so that people can afford to live. We need more affordable housing. I have a plan to build 100,000 new homes in Ottawa over the next 10 years, including 10,000 affordable housing units and supportive housing units for the most vulnerable in our community. So we need to approach this from a number of different angles, including protecting tenants, but also trying to prevent the causes of homelessness in the first place.
Thank you, Mark. Noor.
Well, the city is growing. And with that growth, we have to go above that speed in order to deal with the root causes of the problem. And while the situation is dire, and I've met Lionel, and his concerns are very legitimate, what we need to be looking at is whenever we approve any new project for development, we need to make sure that in the new buildings, there are some affordable housing units. When you're taking a high-rise that is 15 or 16 floors, the city can work with zoning. We can give the developer 2 extra floors with provisions that they must have some affordable part
within that. And we are going to get to zoning in a few moments. All right, for now, we're going to move on to our second question, which is about the municipal housing acquisition strategy.
Hello, everyone, and assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Mohammed Saeed, and I'm a social worker and a volunteer for the Coalition of Health and Resource Centers, working to promote more inclusive and equitable services. In Ottawa, for every new unit of affordable housing we build, 7 affordable units are lost in the private market to demolition or renovation. To prevent this, the city needs to purchase more private market residential properties and turn them over to non-profit housing providers. Protecting the existing affordable rental housing we already have is cheaper and faster than building new affordable housing. As a resident, I often see the impact of the shortage in affordable rental housing when newcomer neighbors arrive and have to stay with family and friends. They often plan to stay for a short period of time, but end up having to stay much longer because of high rents at a great inconvenience to both families. Once newcomers manage to rent something, there are often cultural interpretation difficulties that lead to challenges in maintaining housing, with private landlords starting the cycle up again. As mayor, will you develop a municipal housing acquisition strategy to purchase rental buildings before they are put up for sale on the private market and reserve this housing for nonprofit housing providers?
How would you, as mayor, support the development of a municipal housing acquisition strategy to purchase rental buildings before they're put up for sale on the private market and reserve this housing for nonprofit housing providers? Mark, this time you'll be first and you've got 90 seconds.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the question. At this point, it's not in my platform for the city to have an acquisition strategy, although I would not rule it out in the future. I think we may get to a point where it will be necessary for the city to do that on behalf of the citizens of Ottawa. What is in my platform is a strategy to build more affordable homes over the next 10 years in Ottawa, including supportive homes, and also an investment of $4 million per year to support the agencies that deliver frontline services to the most vulnerable in our community. I think it's really important that we address this issue from a number of different angles, and one of those is to provide immediate support to the agencies that are helping the most vulnerable in our community and delivering those frontline services. So we'll put that into effect immediately. We also simply just have to have more houses available. We have to work with partners like Ottawa Community Housing and other housing providers, not-for-profit housing providers in our community to deliver affordable housing for the homeless. So we need to approach this from a number of different angles, and I would not rule out the city acquiring properties in the future.
Thank you, Mark. Next, Noor, would you support this housing acquisition strategy?
Absolutely, but this strategy has to be long-term. What the city has gone through in the past is they used to get a lot of funding from the federal government and other levels of government, but that was only limited on a budget-by-budget basis. We need to negotiate with the federal governments and provincial governments to work on a 10-year strategy that is long-term, because that will give us a leeway and more negotiation powers to get more value for the bucks. I mean, if many times the city would be getting $50 million to go and buy a set of units from the federal government, but they're limited to spend those before March 31st, which is the start or the end of the budget. And with these, a lot of the sellers on the market, they try to take advantage of that. We need to have a strategy for the long term. A lot of other mayors talked about this before. Nahid Nenshi in Calgary, and John Tory in Toronto. And we could do the same here in Ottawa on a 10-year strategy plan in negotiations with the federal government and provincial governments, and make those purchases annual and on a growth plan. And this is the way to end the problems of affordability.
Thank you, Noor. Catherine, what's your position?
I do very strongly support an acquisition strategy. It's actually key. It's one of the disappointments in the national housing strategy that there isn't a stronger acquisition strategy in there. But my housing plan includes $5 million that would be invested in the Ottawa Community Land Trust. And that land trust, which is a nonprofit, would be able to use that funding moving forward, be able to purchase affordable market rental buildings that come up for sale. They're not all going to be available, obviously, but we know that housing that was built in the 60s and 70s in this city are at getting to the end of their life cycle for for-profit owners. So to be able to do that, again, I go back to for every 1 unit of community housing that we build in this city, we lose at least 7. I mean, that number comes between 2016 and 2020. So I'm sure that it's even higher. So if we don't stop people from falling into homelessness, we are never going to end chronic homelessness on the other end. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd love to dig into this further, but in interest of time, we'll have to move on to the next question, which is about inclusionary zoning. Now, for viewers at home, inclusionary zoning is a municipal planning tool that requires that a given share of new private market construction be affordable to people with low to moderate incomes. Let's listen to the question.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angela Keller-Herzog, and this is Milo and Barb. We're alliance partners from cafes, community associations for environmental sustainability. And we've done some math. With over 48,000 households in core housing need feeling financial pressure, Ottawa needs to plan for a dramatic increase in the supply of deeply affordable housing. Milo?
Hi, I'm Milo. I'm 12 years old, and I hope to have a sustainable future, which I think is attainable by building new housing and making sure that they are energy efficient and carbon zero. That way, utility bills will be predictable and much more affordable.
I'm a mom, and I want my kids to find affordable housing. We need zoning to permit more density if we're going to build lots more housing, but not sprawl. We know that sprawl is both expensive for property taxes and expensive for the climate. We need to zone for more density for creating affordable housing for different sizes of families, for social sustainability and diversity in neighborhoods, and mixed-use zoning to make neighborhoods more economically vibrant.
I'm a grandmother, and I'm worried about our society holding together. Everybody needs a home. Seniors on a fixed income, people with disabilities, people on social assistance. But it's very clear from the way prices have gone that neither the market nor developers can provide deeply affordable housing. If you become mayor, will you support strong inclusionary zoning policies?
How would you, as mayor, support the development of a strong inclusionary zoning policy, ensuring new builds have permanently affordable, energy-efficient units priced based on a household's income? Noor, the floor is yours.
Well, it starts with the zoning, and a lot of that the city can. There's a lot of the city can do on this file. Number one is intensification. Intensification should be done in a smart and a responsible manner, and that should take into account where we do it. We don't want to build high rises in the backyards of people's homes. We need to focus mainly on areas that are close to transit, in downtown, on top of malls, and that's a big part of the intensification aspect, because I totally agree that sprawl is very expensive. Wherever you expand, you need to have more buses, more sewers, and a lot of other services that cost the city, and it's on the backs of the taxpayers. However, when you're building buildings and you go up higher, this is going to be much less expensive. It's going to provide more units on the market. The builders would be bid against each other in terms of competition, and that draws prices down. So the supply will be better, the competition would be better. And on the idea of inclusivity, we need to build win-win situations with the builders. When we give them the possibilities of going much higher in terms of skyscrapers, they need to give us a specific percentage of affordable housing, and that must be done now, not tomorrow.
Thank you. Catherine, would you support strong inclusionary zoning?
Yes, I always have. The city is limited by the province on where we can provide inclusionary zoning. Right now, it's around rapid transit. We have a rather weak policy that we've just introduced. But even when we look at our own land, I'll use Lansdowne as an example. That's public land. It belongs to residents of this city. We just provided 332 $1.2 million of taxpayer dollars to Lansdowne Partners. And even with those air rights on the land that we own, we have not strengthened the inclusion of affordable housing on that land. It's actually, it actually speaks volumes about how little, this city has really put effort that they put into making neighborhoods more inclusive. But I'll also say this, it is also up to governments to provide deeply affordable housing. Inclusionary zoning means that, new neighborhoods are more inclusive. They're not exclusive just to wealthy people. But it is up to government to provide deeply affordable housing, and that's what we need to move towards. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, what are your thoughts?
First of all, I think it was great that we heard from Milo in that question, because when we think about the future of our city, we have to think about our children and grandchildren and whether they will be able to afford to live in Ottawa. And that's a concern that I've heard from a lot of parents and grandparents as I've been speaking to residents throughout the last few months of this campaign. They're worried that their kids and grandkids won't be able to afford to live in Ottawa. So we have to look out for people like Milo and make sure that Ottawa is an affordable place to live. I think we have to drive this in a number of ways, and one of the things that I look at is we need to make sure that we're making it easier and not harder for home builders to provide affordable housing and to hit even higher targets. I know there's a target of 10% in some cases. I think we can go even further than that if we provide incentives for developers to build affordable housing, sustainable affordable housing. So if a developer is going to exceed the minimum amount of affordable housing, then we can provide, as the city, we can provide incentives to do that. The city also owns a lot of land that can be part of a solution for affordable housing. The land around Bayview Station is one example, very close to the two transit lines in Ottawa, the two rapid transit lines. The city could participate in a development there that would include a huge amount of affordable housing because it could be a partner in that development. So I think we have to make sure that we're allowing for affordable housing by providing incentives and removing barriers for people to build affordable housing.
Thank you, Mark. All right, our next question is about increasing the municipal budget for housing. Let's listen in.
Hello, my name is Kevin Judge, and I'm a building representative with CCOC, the largest private nonprofit landlord in Ottawa and an active developer of nonprofit housing. I'm also a tenant in a wonderful CCOC apartment building that includes great features such as accessibility, a community garden, and access to transit. For over 40 years, CCOC has bought and built affordable rental housing, taking advantage of every funding opportunity to increase the stock of housing that is permanently affordable to people with low and modest incomes. We know the costs and the time that it takes to build new housing and the feelings that come with having a safe, permanently affordable and suitable home. Nonprofits are in it for the long run, building and managing rental homes with a focus on tenant quality of life and affordability. Having a stable and predictable stream of city funding allows CCOC to plan projects into the future and leverage funding programs at all levels of government. Ottawa currently has roughly 12,000 households on the social housing registry waitlist. Racialized and Indigenous households are overrepresented in core housing need. These households cannot wait 5 years before their rent becomes affordable. They need support now. While there are portable housing benefits and rental supplements designed to provide assistance to those who have a home they can't afford, these subsidies don't meet the needs of our city. The Starts With Home platform calls on the city to increase the municipal budget to house 1,000 households each year, committing 30% as part of the For Indigenous, by Indigenous housing strategy. How would you, as mayor, support the implementation of this program?
How would you, as mayor, oversee doubling the number of households housed each year through rent subsidies and the creation of nonprofit units, and reserve 30% of this for an Indigenous housing strategy? Catherine, you'll be going first.
Well, thank you. You know, the key to ensuring that we keep people housed and we don't continue to increase the number of people who are falling into is to stop people from falling into homelessness. We have to do three key things. First, we have to stop the loss of existing affordable housing. Then we have to create more housing. We have to, preserve the quality of the housing that we have. But if we're going to end chronic homelessness, we have to build housing, and we also have to provide rent supplements to support people in the community. We also have to ensure that the people who are in core housing need, families, individuals who are at risk of losing their housing today, have the money to stay there. We don't necessarily have to go out and build new housing for the 40,000 people who are in core housing need. They have housing that's adequate in most cases. It's the right size. They just cannot afford it. So we need to ensure that more people are not falling into homelessness, and at the same time, we are building at least 1,000 units of new affordable community housing every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, what do you think?
First of all, I think it's really important that we acknowledge the extraordinary crisis that many Indigenous individuals and families are experiencing right now. It's a tragedy, and it's disproportionately affecting, as was raised in the question, it's disproportionately affecting Indigenous people and racialized communities in Ottawa. So I think we have to acknowledge that, and I think it's really important that we sit down with leaders throughout the community to resolve that issue. I dream of a city where everyone has access to a safe and permanent place to live, and where there aren't these discriminatory results in our system that disadvantage certain people. So I'm ready to sit down with Indigenous leaders and with home builders and with other community leaders to talk about a strategy that will address this head on. As Catherine said, a lot of it comes down to building more housing, and that's why I have a plan over the next 10 years to build 100,000 new homes in Ottawa, including 10,000 affordable homes and supportive homes, 1,000 new affordable and supportive homes per year, so that we are increasing the supply of affordable housing in Ottawa.
Thank you, Mark. Noor, what's your position?
Well, we can't have more of the same. And we need to push the envelope a little bit more. 100,000 homes being built over the next 10 years that is proposed by Mark does not deal with the problem, because this is what is being built in the market. As part of our housing plan, we're proposing 160,000 homes over the next 10 years, and 25% of that are going to be going into affordable housing. And we recognize that there are communities that are more affected than others, including African Canadians, people from the First Nations peoples, and many others, specifically visible minorities. And I've heard what Muhammad has said and Lionel in those perspectives, and also what Angela and Milo referred to. And Mr. Judge put his finger on the point. What we need going forward is to be smart and think outside the box. I was talking at a charity event with somebody who works for an organization that has $300 million to build affordable green housing. We could look at two targets here, the environment and affordability. He told me 2 weeks ago I was in Vancouver, I have partners there. A week before he was in Halifax, he's got partners there. The city of Ottawa was absent, and they didn't have partners here. We need to tap into those monies that are available and increase the affordability aspects by thinking outside the box and tapping into the monies that are out there.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick second just for a follow-up question because I don't want to lose track of the 30% for Indigenous by Indigenous solutions. So just very quickly, would you support reserving 30% of these efforts and monies for Indigenous by Indigenous solutions? Catherine?
Yes, of course I would. I've had these conversations with Indigenous housing partners. The key way we can recognize and reconcile with Indigenous people in this city is to end chronic homelessness. They're disproportionately represented in our homeless population, in our chronic homeless population, and we've got to ensure that. Thanks.
Mark, go for it.
So I'm open to setting a target like that. And again, I want to sit down with Indigenous leaders and with leaders from throughout the community. I think this is a community priority. I think the entire city cares about this issue. This is an important time in our country's history for reconciliation, and this is a potential solution to that. So I'm ready to sit down with leaders to set a target and decide how we actually achieve those goals.
Thanks, Mark. Noor?
We need to set targets for all disenfranchised communities, including the Indigenous peoples of Canada. That's one thing. But another additional thing that is this does not go far enough because the 12,000 weight line is very long. And if I'm going to use my math skills here, it's going to take 24 years in order to fix it. I don't plan to run for six terms, and we want to go more ambitious in this.
Thank you, Noor. All right, our next question is about landlord licensing.
Sanse, greetings. My colleagues and I are community liaisons for the Alliance to End Homelessness in Ottawa. In an effort to preserve the quality of existing rental housing, the Starts With Home platform suggests that the City of Ottawa require landlords to be licensed for more effective oversight of property maintenance and to provide funding where needed for small landlords to do maintenance repairs rather than sell their rental units. This policy would require landlords to register with the city, better equipping the city to enforce those standards.
I live in an affordable rental building. Over the past year and a half, pesticides have been repeatedly applied almost weekly throughout the entire building to deal reactively with pest infestations. During this time, the landlord has failed to respond to numerous tenant questions regarding the inadequacy of the ventilation system. Over this same period of time, my respirologist was surprised and concerned at the rapid and significant decrease in my lung function. Despite seeing the letter from my physician explaining that my condition made the use of these substances something to be avoided, the landlord has continued to apply pesticides regularly in the building, claiming that other pest management techniques are too costly.
We need a system that is equitable so that no one is forced to choose between poor housing or no housing. We need a system that is accessible so that people have somewhere to go that is safe, timely, and easy to navigate if they're struggling with their landlord. We need a program that is adequately enforced so that no one is left on their own to defend their right to adequate, safe, and suitable housing. Would you, as mayor, support a landlord licensing program so these basic standards are met no matter what type of rental housing someone is living in?
So how would you as mayor support and implement a landlord licensing program so that basic standards are met no matter what type of rental housing someone is living in? And Mark, the floor is yours.
First of all, I want to say how much I sympathize with Suzanne in that story. And I'll tell you, as watching that, my late sister had respiratory issues, and so I can really relate to Suzanne's experience about the use of pesticides in Suzanne's environment, despite Suzanne's respiratory issues. So we need to be very, we never want a situation where someone like Suzanne is acting on their own in a situation like that. So I'm open to looking at this. I think we have to remember that there are there are all kinds of landlords in Ottawa. There are big and small landlords. There are good landlords and bad landlords. And so we need to take an approach to this that will protect and strengthen the protections for tenants in Ottawa, make sure their rights are protected, but do it in a way that is balanced and fair, because we can't expect a property owner who maybe is renting out one property it's very difficult to write rules and regulations that will also apply to a large corporation that might be renting out tens of thousands of properties throughout the city. So I think there needs to be an intricate approach to this, but I'm open to the idea of strengthening protection for tenants.
Thank you, Mark. Noor.
Well, a licensing program will make the floor even for everyone. And because there are good landlords and bad landlords, we want everybody to be on the same level, and we want everybody to behave to a specific standard. The good landlords should be happy about that because they really don't need to add a lot of stuff. The bad ones, they have to comply, and they need to go into living up to the standards and make sure that situations like the one that Suzanne has to go through will not happen again. On the other hand, we need to also take into account that there are small landlords that they cannot do it on their own, and that's where the city can jump in, and other levels of government and community organizations who are pushing for that. So when we've got green municipal funds that are looking at these things and they want to retrofit and give benefits, they can prioritize the small landlords. They can prioritize those old units that need to be put forward, rather than forcing those small landlords to sell. And then we go into other issues of renovictions and then evictions again. So standardization works in every domain, and in housing affordability, it should be no exception.
Thank you, Noor. Catherine?
Thank you. Well, my platform does include strengthening property standard rules and ensuring that we have a standard for when bylaw enters a property and when it has to be maintained up to an adequate level. We saw that with Herongate. Herongate's probably our most egregious example, but it happens across the city. And with Herongate, we saw a large corporation come in, buy up that housing, and allow it to deteriorate to a point where it was almost unlivable. And then we had the largest displacement in our history of a racialized community. We made national media for the wrong reasons in this city. And not long ago, I was actually in Herongate knocking doors, and what's left of those units, there was a woman in there who had been calling the landlord because her window was broken. They came in, they put a piece of wood. This was on and had been there. Her bedroom window is just a piece of plywood, and it's been like that for almost a year. We've got to ensure that landlords are held to a certain account. There are many good landlords in this city, but for the ones that allowed this to happen, only to come to us later to get applications for redevelopment, have got to be stopped.
Thank you, Catherine. So it sounds like we have some level of agreement that there's a need for standards and the strengthening of standards, and maybe openness to licensing as long as it can be nuanced. I want to make sure that our viewers really understand what we mean when we're talking about these basic standards. You've all been knocking on doors. What are some of the issues that the people that you've been speaking to are coming across that, in your opinion, would not meet these basic standards? And again, we don't have very much time, so we'll want to be brief. Mark, you can get us going.
Well, I think we've already heard some of the examples. Catherine has brought up a few very good examples. I really sympathize with people in Ottawa who are living in substandard conditions, and that's not acceptable, and it can't continue. And whatever role the city can play, and there's a role for the provincial government to play as well in this, obviously, we need to make sure that that's happening, and we know what's going on. And again, I come back to the idea that in a city as prosperous as Ottawa, there should be no one living on the streets. There should be no one forced to stay in shelters. There should be no one couch surfing, and there should be no one who's living in substandard rental conditions.
Thank you. Noor.
Well, it's easier said than done. I was yesterday in 425 Bernard Street off Queen Mary, and This is city living. You look at these things and then it is substandards. And it's not only the landlords that are happening there. The city, when they own their properties, they don't even go up to the standard themselves. So when we have these types of approaches to standardization, we make sure that nobody is left behind and the city will be accountable too.
Thank you. Catherine, very briefly.
Well, we have examples all over the city. Point you in the direction of, some of our overcrowded rooming houses where people are living in deplorable conditions. Again, not all rooming houses, some of them are very, very well maintained, but the ones that aren't are actually quite deplorable.
Thank you, Catherine. So our last question is about assigning a housing ombudsperson. Let's hear the question.
My name is Patrick, and I'm involved with the Ottawa Food Bank and network of 108 member agencies. The Starts With Home platform calls for the city to assign an independent housing ombudsperson to implement the right to housing in line with the federal commitment to housing as a human right. The ombudsperson's work would include monitoring progress in meeting timelines and targets of the 10-year plan and reviewing submissions of violations of the right to housing. The ombudsperson would give City Council recommendations to fulfill its human rights obligations to housing. Housing insecurity and food insecurity go hand in hand. The right to food is a fundamental human right. Canada has a legal obligation to respect, protect, and fulfill the right to food. And yet food insecurity in Ottawa is an all-time high in every community. This rise in food bank use clearly shows that greater measures must be taken to address food insecurity that go beyond depending on charity to feed individuals in need. Food insecurity is not solved with one meal, just as housing insecurity does not end with a roof over your head. Having to choose between groceries and food banks or rent and shelters is no choice anyone should need to make. We need a system centered in equity, where housing and food are affordable, accessible, and suitable. Would you, as mayor, support assigning a housing ombudsperson to monitor, report on, and enforce the right to housing?
How would you as mayor support and implement the assignment of a housing ombudsperson to monitor, report, and enforce the right to housing? Noor, you've got the floor.
Well, I want to dwell a little bit on the aspect of food security too, because it's part of our plan. We've got 1,100 farms in Ottawa. And during the pandemic, we have seen those types of challenges. And a big part of this has to do with regional supply chains that are broken, not enough support for farmers. And we've got a food security plan that is going to take into account empowering many elements of this. Going back to that ombudsperson on housing, I've worked in compliance with many organizations as an executive myself, whether to enforce quality assurance, whether to enforce privacy. And I always thought that the aspect of compliance starts by responsibility, accountability, and ownership. And when we hire or assign an ombudsperson to an organization, it means that we are serious about it. It means that we are owning to the problems, and it means that we are accountable and responsible for that. So I definitely, this is going to be a starting point by having a housing ombudsperson in order to monitor, report, and enforce the right on housing. There are lots of elements that we can draw on. There are ombudspersons in many places around the world. Actually, we've got two of my deputy campaign managers who work as ombudspersons in organizations. And we talk always about the importance of enforcing policies, and I am fully supportive of that.
Thank you. Catherine.
Thank you. Well, my plan for housing and homelessness over this first term as mayor, I would end chronic homelessness in the first term for both individuals and families. I would build 1,000 new affordable units, moderate and deeply affordable units. I would prevent families and individuals from falling into homelessness by having rent supplements available so that people don't lose their housing. And we would retain our existing housing stock by, investing in a land trust that would work to acquire housing when it comes up onto private market. As mayor, I would be your champion. There would not be a morning that I don't get up, that I don't think about who slept in a shelter last night, who is at risk of losing their housing, what families are living in motels today, doing their dishes in a bathtub, eating out of a microwave. I would commit every day to sitting down with staff and ensuring that we are monitoring the results of, who is homeless, who slept in a shelter, why did they sleep in a shelter, who lost their housing, why did they lose their housing, and what can we do tomorrow to make sure that we have better results tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark.
I'm really glad that we're talking about food insecurity as part of this issue, and I was glad that was brought up by Patrick in the question. I met with the Parkdale Food Centre a couple of times. I met with the Ottawa Food Bank during this campaign. The Ottawa Food Bank has a goal of putting itself out of business by 2050, of eliminating the need for food banks in Ottawa by 2050. I think that's an ambitious but admirable and exciting goal that we can all get behind. And in fact, when I officially launched my campaign about a month ago, I included that. I'd love to set that as a goal of putting food banks out of business by 2050. So food insecurity is an increasing problem in our community, and we need to address that. As Catherine says, I think the responsibility for the homeless in our community has to rest with the mayor and the leadership at Ottawa City Hall. So whether we appoint an ombudsperson or we approach it a different way, I think it's really important that we have timely and accurate reporting to establish accountability on how many people are homeless, how many people are staying in shelters, how many people are in motel rooms and hotel rooms, and what we're actually actively doing to change those numbers. I have a number of different things in my plan about moving people out of motel rooms and into safer, permanent, supportive housing. That's what we need to do, and I intend to build 1,000 affordable and supportive housing units per year for the next 10 years in Ottawa.
Thanks, Mark. So, Noor, you've expressed your support of appointing an ombudsperson. Mark, you're open to the discussion, and Catherine, you didn't quite get to it, but you're nodding, so you're also open to it. But it seems like there might also be an argument that it would sit better with the mayor and with council. Can you just explain to us very briefly what that means? And we're going to start with Noor.
Well, when you don't have an ombudsperson in place, it means that you're going to leave things as they are. Okay, every mayor would say that we are working on trying to end homelessness. Okay, and both my colleagues, Mark and Catherine, their numbers don't add up. I mean, they want to build 1,000 affordable units, and they want to end homelessness. And if we look at how dire the problem is, 1,000 units is not enough.
Thank you, Noor. Catherine.
Again, it does rest with leadership at the city. It has got to be a priority. If it's not a priority, if we report back on our housing numbers once a year, every year, we grapple with what to do next. So it does rest with leadership. It rests in the mayor's office, and it rests with the staff that you have in place and the power that you give them to go out and do things, try new things, and not be, boxed in by existing rules. We've done it before.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks.
So an ombudsman.
I agree with Catherine, because I think this is an issue where the accountability has to rest with the mayor and with city council, and the decisions that the city makes going forward have to be viewed through the lens of ending homelessness. And so we can't put that in a silo. That's why I'm not in favor of creating new bureaucratic positions at the city. I'd rather take that money and invest it in solutions and make sure the accountability is at a higher level at the City of Ottawa.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I want to say a big thank you to our candidates today for taking the time to come and discuss this really important issue with all of us, and for taking the time to develop your housing plans, right? We can solve homelessness and housing need, but we need leadership. We're looking to our next mayor of Ottawa to use all the municipal tools and resources available to make sure that everyone has a safe, stable, and affordable home. Best of luck to you all.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you.
I also want to thank the viewers for taking the time to watch this debate. To find out more about the Starts With Home campaign, visit startswithhome.ca. We encourage you to read the platform, endorse the campaign, and talk to your mayoral and ward candidates to let them know this issue is important to you. You can visit the candidates section to see whether candidates for your ward and for mayor have endorsed Starts With Home. And of course, voting day is October 24th, so please go out and vote. And finally, thanks to each of the Starts With Home debate organizing committee members: the Alliance to End Homelessness Ottawa, Centertown Citizens Ottawa Corporation, Coalition of Community Health and Resource Centers of Ottawa, Community Associations for Environmental Sustainability, Ottawa Acorn, Ottawa Food Bank and network of 108 agencies, Ottawa Social Housing Network, and the Parkdale Food Centre. A special thanks to Rogers TV for offering this space and recording this debate. Thank you all. Good day.